A few months ago, I was trying to figure out what to get my girlfriend for her birthday. Instead of going out and buying her something really cool like a normal person, I decided that I'd spend way too much time and money building her something that kind of worked. And this is that story. Just like any mediocre project idea that I've ever had, this one started out with messing around in CAD late at night. This is what I came up with. It's basically a frame with a channel for LEDs to sit in that will be covered with frosted plexiglass to diffuse the light from the LEDs. The actual face of the mirror is glass with a one-way mirror plexiglass behind that and a black foam board behind that will have a hole cut in it for the LCD to sit in. I didn't model any of the electronics, but they'll live in the back of the mirror, and I'll have a panel on the back of the mirror covering up all the electronics. The first thing I needed to do was acquire some wood, so I went to the store and bought some 1x2s and 1x4s to make the frame for the mirror with. I tried to route the LED channel myself and ended up burning out our router and destroying a 1x2, so I eventually just bought another 1x2 and brought it to a family friend who had the proper equipment, and he was able to get great results. After I got the properly routed 1x2s back, I started making measurements and marking them to cut and make into the frame shape. It was at this point in the project that I realized I was pretty bad at glue-ups and woodworking in general. This is one of the main reasons that I think I'm gonna make an entirely new frame and then transfer all the electronics and the mirror over to that new frame. But I just worked with what I had and tried to make everything as square as possible, and in the end, it turned out to be not too bad. And by that I mean bad, but you have to pay attention to notice that it's bad. In this clip, you can see me noticing that the two frames aren't square perfectly with one another, and then coming to terms with that, then doing a little bit of sanding and a little bit of gluing and putting the two halves of the frame together. While I was busy being bad at woodworking, my clone had ordered some stuff on Amazon. Looks like there are some dirt cheap office speakers, a dirt cheap power strip, and the actual one-way mirror. I also picked up a sheet of cheap hardware store glass. It was the right width, but I had to cut it down to size, and I was afraid I was going to cut myself, but it turned out to just be really easy to do. The one-way mirror I ordered from Amazon is acrylic, and that scratches very easily, so I wanted to have the sheet of glass on the front in case the mirror got dirty. You could clean it off very easily. So I was just going to sandwich the one-way mirror behind it like this. At this point, I decided it was time to make the back for the mirror. I had a spare piece of MDF lying around, so I decided to hack that up and make the back out of that. At this point, the LCD for the project had come in the mail. I chose an iPad 1 screen for the 4:3 aspect ratio because I thought that would look nice in the mirror, and I also ordered a driver board so that the LCD could be run independent of the iPad itself. And this is an initial test of the driver board to make sure it actually works with the LCD, because sometimes the stuff you order off eBay doesn't properly work. Fortunately, this one did. As you can see, my Roku's actually working on there, which is pretty cool. And after that, I peeled the LCD off of the glass digitizer. Before I painted the frame, I drilled the hole where the wires for the LEDs that would go in the channel would eventually go, and test fit those to make sure they'd fit. And then I painted the front face of the frame, which would be white. Unfortunately, I only have a video of me priming it, so there's that. So in order for the one-way mirror to act as an actual mirror when the screen is off, it needs to have a black background everywhere else. So I got some foam board and some black construction paper because I couldn't find any black foam board, and taped the two together. I took a lot of time to make sure that my LCD was going to be square with the mirror. If it's not square, it'll look like the LCD is sitting crooked when you turn the screen on, which you don't really want. And if you watch carefully here, you can see the construction paper actually rip when I take this off. So in version 2 of this project, I might want to use a different backing material than this. And at this point, with the front of the mirror painted and the foam board ready to go, it was time to put the glass in, and then follow that up with the actual one-way mirror, and then put the foam board with the LCD behind that. And if you look around the LCD, you can kind of see the touch-up that I had to do when I ripped that piece of construction paper. So I didn't get this part on camera. All I did was take 3 pieces of scrap wood, cut them to size, and then press them up against the foam board and screw them in on either side through the frame. I also plugged in the driver board and hot glued it to one of those pieces of wood, but having only 3 pieces of wood isn't really a great way to get even pressure on that plexiglass sheet that needs to be flat. I decided I needed a little break from working on the frame, so I took a look at these buttons for the LCD driver and decided that they needed an actual housing and actual buttons so that I could actually install them into the mirror. So I opened up CAD and started making a little box for them that I could 3D print. So I made a little 2-part box in SolidWorks, a flat bottom piece for the circuit board to be hot glued onto, and then a top piece with a flat faceplate with holes in it, and then buttons that I could insert through the back of that plate that would actually reach down and hit those tactile buttons on the actual circuit board. Excuse the camera audio in the next clip. Apparently I forgot I was doing a voiceover for this.
I went ahead and cut these out yesterday. I basically took 2 boards and screwed them together and then just cut out the simple shape on the vertical bandsaw over there. And then I just drilled 2 holes and I also just drilled a quick hole through either side here. And so now I'm gonna throw some washers on this, make sure everything's okay, and then I'll probably go ahead and paint this stuff. Just put a big washer on the outside and a big one on the inside just to kind of space it out. I don't know if you can see that. Obviously I'm gonna need to get some cleaner looking hardware, but that shouldn't be too expensive. I just wanted to see if it works, and my whole goal with this was so that it would be kind of friction adjustable, and it is. So that's awesome, and it sits like the perfect height off the ground, just what I wanted. So I'm pretty excited about that. And now I think it's time for paint.
I decided to go with a copper finish for the stand and then a matte black for the rest of the mirror. When I redo this, I think I'm going to go gloss black on the frame, and I'm going to keep those copper colored stands. And I could finally take out the masking tape that was covering up the white section that I painted way at the beginning. After the stands had dried, I realized that I really didn't sand them at all, so they came out pretty rough. So I decided it would be best to sand them quick and then repaint them and get a smoother finish on the outside for those. From the very beginning, I knew that I wanted a piece of frosted acrylic covering the LEDs, and I decided the cleanest way that could be done was out of a single piece of plexiglass. And I was lucky enough to get this part cut out on a CNC router by an awesome guy in one of the labs at my school. And while all this other stuff was drying, I decided it was a great time to actually spray the frost onto this piece. I put probably 5 or 6 coats on it. For holding the LEDs in place, I used the adhesive that comes on the back of them, and I used a little bit of hot glue on the corners. Here I'm attaching the plug to the wires for the LEDs. This is just a plug with 2 screws to hold the wires. So obviously when I turned this on, I messed something up. I think I broke a connection in this corner. Fortunately though, these LED strips can be cut and re-spliced together, so I just cut out the bad chunk and soldered in a good chunk on that corner. After soldering the LEDs back together, it was finally time to put all the electronics in the back of the mirror and start actually putting this thing together. While I was assembling this, I started up my 3D printer, printing the buttons and that button box for the LCD controller. Overall, this design worked pretty well. I wish I would have been a little bit tighter with my measurements, but it ended up working fine. I hot glued everything together, then cut a hole in the back of the mirror and hot glued the box in place. One of my final tasks was to put the plexiglass LED cover on, and so I cut up these metal brackets to hold it on. I have no idea why I didn't just 3D print these. In the second version of this mirror, they're definitely going to be 3D printed. The last two things I did were glue the speakers into the frame. These really don't sound good, and I'm going to come up with another solution for audio. I also spliced in the receiver that came with the LEDs so it could be controlled with the remote. And here's the finished product. I think I'm off to a pretty good start. This mirror looks great at a distance, but when you get up close you start to notice all the little things that are wrong with it. So I really want to touch on those in a second video. The screen seems kind of dim in this video. I got some warping in the mirror that you can see if you look closely. But overall, for a first try, I think this is pretty good, and I'm excited to improve it in the future.